I am going to start to share my screen and introduce Renee Beddouk, who is our first speaker. And also, very importantly, today is Renee's birthday. So happy birthday, Renee.
Thank you, Susan. I was born in Paris, France, of French naturalized citizens. My father came as a young man from Poland, enlisted in the French Foreign Legion and then the French Army, and at the age of 24 in 1931, he became a French citizen. My mother was the youngest of six. The oldest three were born in Poland, and the youngest three, and this is my mother in white, were born in Russia by the Astrakhan, by the Caspian Sea. I never knew my maternal grandfather because he died young, and my oldest aunt and Helen brought the whole family to France when they were still young because they spoke French. Everybody spoke French without an accent. How she did it, I have no idea. My father and mother, my mother had been a salesgirl. My father was a tailor. How they met, I have no idea. The only picture I have of them together, the next picture, please, is their wedding picture. It's the only picture I have of my parents together. We lived with my grandmother a little further down, and all I remember as a child, being a happy child and not particularly anxious for anything. France was invaded by the Nazis in May of 1940. And the French government at the time cut France in two. My oldest aunt, here with her husband, Uncle Jacques. Uncle Jacques had a lung problem, not because he smoked, but because he worked in the coal mines of Poland as a young boy. They wanted to, at the time, I'm talking about the 1940s, early 40s, the only operation that could be done was in New York. And as the family had cousins who had come from Poland to New York in the late 20s, they asked them to make the papers. For some reason, my aunt and uncle could not take, if we can go to the map, could not take the last boat from Marseille around here. So they probably took a bus. This is France cut in two. The northern part, as you see, under Nazi rule, and the French government here. And somehow my aunt and uncle wound up with the bus. And this is the city of Clermont-Ferrand in the center of France. And they wound up in the little village, you can't see there, of Estendeuil. How they got there, probably by bus. And once they were established there, my uncle did frames and stuff for the farmers. This is a farm area. They wrote to my parents and asked them to come and leave. It took a while for my father, I know. What I remember about traveling is that we traveled at night. I think I was about 7 or 7.5. And something that stuck in my mind, as I was told, you don't talk, you don't sneeze, cough, not a peep out of you. I know that we traveled on horse-drawn carriage carts, and we were escorted. We were not the only ones, and we were escorted by the French underground. So we settled here. So my father opened a shop, an apartment, made his shop, and we lived in the next apartment. And he didn't want to go in the country about here. So finally my parents decided to send me. I don't know how my aunt and uncle found this couple. And there are the Chastins. Now they're in black. They have very stern features, and they already had 6 children. And that's me. So I cannot be more than 7.5 or 8. This little boy doesn't belong here. He was a neighbor's son. This is Arthur, and he was her son by first marriage. And this is Fernande and Paul and Marc. And the other oldest boy was already in apprenticeship to become a baker and pastry maker. And this family, with already 6 children, took me literally as their 7th child. I was adopted and loved by everybody, even though you saw the stern pictures before. But I had chores to do, like you have on the farm. And I followed Fernande like a puppy. She was 8 or 8.5 years older than me, and I just followed her. Now, I learned how to feed the chickens. There were rabbits. I was given a baby goat. And for a little girl who came from Paris, a big city, and Clermont-Ferrand, another big city, to be on the farm, I missed my parents, but I was not unhappy. Now, I knew that I had seen my mother. I remembered seeing her at least once. And until Henri told me in 2011, he remembered my mother coming on a bicycle. So she did 25, 30 kilometers to come and see me on a bicycle. I stayed with the Shasta family for 3.5 years until my aunt and uncle took me back to Paris. And then she requested from the cousins in New York to have papers drawn up for me, for them, my aunt and uncle, for me, and for another, my cousin, who was also a war orphan. And we came to the US in mid-March of 1946. We were on the first non-military ship that left France. And as I said, I was child loved. There was no running water. So I took a bath out in front of the house with a tap and a big metal tub. So conditions were not exactly sanitary, but I was not unhappy because I had all the love around me. When I came here, I had to adjust to a lot of things. So my memories of the Shasta family were good in one way, and also not so good because I found out at the age of 9 that I no longer had parents. I went to school and I went to church every Sunday, and there was my school picture. And there I am, about 9. And this is my cousin who later came. Estendeuil had about 200 and some people spread out because it was farm country. The center of town had the school, it had the church, it had a bakery, and it had an office of City Hall, and that was it. Here in the school, it was one couple. He did the older children, and she did the younger children up until the certificat d'études, which was normally about 13, 14, which was the first measure of knowledge that the kids had. It no longer exists. And there I was, and I was like everybody else, not unhappy. I learned how to knit woolen socks with 5 needles and 2 pairs of woolen socks in the winter, a little bit of straw at the toes, and we walked the 2.5 kilometers to town to go to school. And as I said, I was not unhappy. These documents are the Nazi manifest of transport number 60, which took my parents from Drancy, a northern suburb and holding area, directly to Auschwitz. They're the actual Nazi transport. At the end, on the other side, they show that they also took chocolate, potatoes, sugar, salt. And there you have my parents with their date of birth and their what they did. My father was a tailor, and my mother had been a salesgirl. And here you have flour, potatoes, chocolate, coffee, sugar, salt, everything that was being on the same transport that were taken from the farmers, from the French farmers, and taken to Germany. And this is the actual manifest that was obtained. I got my cousin got it for me at the Memorial de la Shoah in Paris, the Holocaust Museum. These are cards given to me by the French government for my parents and for myself, parents, and it has the wrong dates. You saw in the manifest that both my parents were on the same transport. The French government did a lousy job and had my father in Drancy since 1942. That is not true, but I never bothered to have it corrected. I didn't think it was worth it. But see, that's what they said in June of 1942. And they don't even have my parents on the same transport. And I have other papers also that show the same erroneous dates. I didn't feel that it was necessary to have them corrected. I had the Nazi papers and duly recorded at the Memorial de la Shoah in Paris. So, but all the papers from the French government, from my parents, show the wrong date for my father. I have no idea why. And these are act of that disappearance. It's a euphemism, disappearance. But it shows also the same wrong dates. And this is the boat on which I came. It was a converted cargo ship. And it took from the coast of France to New York 14 days of lousy weather. I may be from a Pisces sign, but I don't like the water. And I certainly didn't like the ship. They converted the cargo into cabins for men on one side. So my cousin went with my uncle. I went with my aunt, and not very comfortable. And this is the manifest of the boat. And there is my aunt, and there is me. I did look for, I got that at the National Archives in Washington, since I knew the name of the boat and the date. They got it for me right away. This is the first time that I met, I wanted, after working at the museum or being associated with the museum, I thought the Shasta family should be recognized by Yad Vashem. But so many days, years had gone by that all of a sudden I did not recognize, I did not remember their name. So a friend of mine got their name. And this is Fernande, Hélène. And when I reconnected with them, it was in 2011. And in 2012, they were their parents, Marc and Marceline Chassin, were recognized as righteous among nations by Yad Vashem. And we had a ceremony with another village in 2000, early March 2013. When I reconnected, there were three of them, Henri, Fernand, Hélène. When we had the ceremony, there were only Fernand and Henri. And after I reconnected with them, I spoke to Fernand every week from New York, from here, from Florida. And she waited for my call. And she called me her little American sister. And I called her my big sister. And her niece, her daughters here, Chantal and Sylvie, called me Tata, which means auntie in French. And so did the smaller children. Fernand passed away. It's going to be 5 years now, a week shy of her 89th birthday. Henri passed away 3 years ago. And I was in that area. I wanted to go and see him because I knew he was not well. And he passed away about 3 months after I saw him. And I'm still in contact with Sylvie all the time. And this is the man who was in the picture. He was in school with me, and he's the one who made me reconnect with the Chassins. Otherwise, I didn't know their name. But as I said, I'm still in contact with Sylvie and her family.
Maud is up next, and I am going to spotlight Maud so we can see you.
Now, I was born in the Netherlands and lived there with my mother, father, and a younger sister. And as you know, Hitler came to power and things started to happen in Germany. My mother had originally come from Frankfurt am Main, and her father was he was with the synagogue he was the cantor at the synagogue in Frankfurt am Main. My parents decided it was best for them to come to the Netherlands. The Netherlands had remained neutral in the First World War, and we assumed to be neutral in the Second World War. So they said it's best for them to come and live with us, as many, many Jews were leaving Germany, going in all directions possible. So they came to live with us, and we woke up one morning in 1940, on May 10th at 3:30 in the morning. The Netherlands was invaded by the German army. It was quite a shock to everyone. No one expected this. And for 5 days, the Dutch fought the German army. However, on the 5th day, Hitler decided he was going to do something because he didn't expect the resistance. He had invaded both Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands at the same time. The Dutch put up such great resistance that Hitler decided after 5 days that he came in and he bombed our biggest city of Rotterdam. Many people died, many people were left homeless, and Hitler said, if you do not surrender now, I am going to bomb every city in the Netherlands. So the Dutch surrendered, and that's when it started for the Jews of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a monarchy. The Queen had left the country, and now someone by the name of Dr. Arthur Seyss-Inquart was now the commandant of the Netherlands. And very quickly, as was happening in other countries, restrictions started to come out against the Jews, and especially the Jews in the Netherlands. More and more things. So if you know public transportation, at the age of anyone over 6 years old had to wear the yellow star. So I was very excited because I had just turned 6. And I was so excited that I could wear a star because I felt so grown up. My sister was only 4, but I did not understand what it meant. Of course, my parents did. and more restrictions started coming. And we, in my hometown of Amersfoort, we had one synagogue, and the rabbi called the congregation together and read a letter from the German command informing us that on this particular day, he named the date, the time, a train would be at the train station to take us east. Well, nobody quite understood what that meant. And it would be wonderful because the fathers can get jobs. Everyone who was Jewish had been fired. It had become very difficult as a Jew to live in the Netherlands. So my parents stopped at a friend's house, a Christian friend, and you're not supposed to see them either. I mean, there were so many restrictions. And he said the Dutch underground resistance had been very busy going all through the Netherlands, finding Christian families to see if the time was needed, would they hide Jewish children? I have an address for your 2 daughters. I can't tell you who they are, can't tell you where they live, other than they live on a farm. So my parents went home, and for the love of their children, they decided we should go, even though they had no idea if they would ever see us again. And we did, and we went to, we were brought to someone's house, and this gentleman from the underground did indeed bring us to a farm. And the couple were in their 60s, quite elderly already, but they were willing to risk their lives because anyone who was caught hiding Jews also would be taken away. So we stayed with this family. At the age of 6.5 when we arrived, I was told why I was there. This was not a vacation on the farm for a couple of weeks. And they sat me down and told me this: this will be your name from now on. You will carry our name because you're supposed to be our nieces who have been bombed out of the city. So your name will not be Mout Paper anymore. Your name will be Margie Sprunk. And you have to remember this, and you have to take care of your little sister. So it was very difficult to try to absorb all that, I guess, at the age of 6.5. But I watched over my sister constantly, all the time, to be very careful. We couldn't go to school. We, fortunately, we had some food on the farm. But after, I guess it must have been right after Christmas. Now we went into hiding in the summer of 1942. It's now after Christmas, 1944. And evidently someone had revealed our whereabouts. And we were immediately, from one day to the next, moved to another family in a little fishing village, Elburg. There it became extremely difficult because this was the hunger winter of the Netherlands. Thousands of people died. All the food was confiscated, sent to Germany, etc. So we had no food, except that this was a fishing family. And he went out and fished every day. And the fish that he caught, and I sometimes ask kids and they come up with everything, but it was eel. So we had cooked eel for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. Nobody was going to school anymore. But we had heard about the landing in France, but it wasn't until April 19th, 1945, that the Canadian soldiers came into the village and freed the village. We were now free. We were told our parents were still alive. And we went back to the farm to wait for our parents, who we did not recognize and didn't know. But we did go back home. I said, I will go back with you, and if we don't like you, we're coming back to live on the farm. We went back with my parents. Unfortunately, and my parents survived. Friends hid them in an attic for 3 years in my hometown. The rest of my family, my Dutch grandparents, my German grandparents, my father had a sister. She was married. I had 3 little cousins. They all perished in Sobibor. We were the only 4 who survived. And it left us, I was now 9 years old, and it was a very difficult adjustment. I had a nervous breakdown, if you can imagine, as a child. But I kind of healed myself, I guess. And we stayed with my parents, and we had an opportunity to come to the United States Some of my mother's relatives from Germany had left before and had settled in the United States and offered to sponsor us to come to the United States. And we came to the United States in 1950. And again, it was starting life all over. After the war, when we returned back with my parents to our hometown, we had no house. It had been bombed. We moved into my grandparents' house. They were not there, hadn't come back. And of course, as I said, they didn't. And it was very hard. There was nothing left. Everything was plundered. Everything was gone. And it was a very difficult adjustment. The Canadians set up a soup kitchen. That's how we started life again after the war. And then coming to the United States as immigrants, we started life all over again. So it was very, very difficult. But I am married and I have 4 children and we have 9 grandchildren. So Hitler did not succeed. Our tree continues. All the branches were taken off, new branches are coming, and the tree is fully alive again.
All right. Renee Fritz, you remember to unmute yourself, and I'm going to share my screen so we can see your pictures.
My name is Renee Fritz, as you all saw. I was born in Vienna, Austria, and I'm an only child of Sabina and Nicholas Schwal. And when Hitler invaded and had the Anschluss in Austria, my father was taken to Dachau, and I was put on a kinder transport to Belgium at the time. My mother stayed back in Vienna to see if perhaps she could get some false documents for my father to get him out of the country, which she was able to purchase still because it was 1939. And through the black market, she was able to get false papers for him. She got him out of Dachau and said, you know, you just leave wherever you can go, just go and we will follow. In the meantime, because I had gone to Belgium to meet with my grandparents, my mother decided that she was going to follow me and let my father just go. My mother then came to Belgium and she was able to reunite with me. I was a very young child, of course. I was like 2 or 3 years old only. And I lived with my grandparents. And one day, accidentally, my mother ran into this woman by the name of Madame Desgelas. And she said that she could see that my mother, of course, had the star on her. And she said to her, you know what? She said, I am going to, through the church, find you a place and try to hide you. Well, what she did is she closed up her apartment and she hid about 30 of us because at the time we were all living in a factory in Belgium. So we packed up and we moved to Brussels. That's where she lived. She closed some of the rooms and we proceeded on going there. However, because I was so young, she was very nervous that someone would find out that she was doing this. And she was a very devout Catholic. So through the church, she and the priest worked out where I would go to a convent, which is what happened to me. So Madame Desgelas took me to a convent in Pâturage, Belgium, and the convent of Saint Michel. And there, which are the pictures that you're seeing right now, are there's Sister Louise, the one in the last row there with the glasses on. And she was to be with me 24/7, so to speak. And I met the Mother Superior, and the Mother Superior told me that I'm going to have a new name, and she gave me rosary beads, and my name was going to be Suzanne Ledon. And with the rosary beads, every time I learned another prayer, that I would get a medal. So she gave me a large safety pin and she put a medal on it. And every time I would be able to recite the poem or whatever you were supposed to do for the beads, I would get another medal. So I was very diligent and decided that I'm going to learn to do this. However, what happened was I stayed there for a number of years, became a very good Catholic and knew all my prayers, but I was very secluded because the convent, I was not able to mix with anyone, even though it was a day school for children, but I was not allowed to meet anyone, and I was to be quiet constantly. And the thing was that I only spoke German and Yiddish at the time, but that soon converted to French and Flemish. And I only associated with this one nun. Anyways, the Germans became very suspicious of the convent, and they decided that it was better to get me out of there. So then Madame Degelas came and picked me up, and she took me to a farm family in the countryside of Belgium. And at that countryside, I learned how to milk a cow, take care of chickens, and I was really very happy there. But unfortunately, I was not able to stay there. And in the middle of the night, a strange man came and he picked me up, and he then took me to an orphanage. Well, the orphanage was located right across the street from Nazi headquarters. So we were right on top of them. However, they thought that it was a school for children who had disciplinary problems. So they would come over and visit and so forth, but never paid too much attention to anything else. In 1945, the Battle of the Bulge started, and I was only a few kilometers from where the Battle of the Bulge was fought. So after the Battle of the Bulge, the American soldiers came and they took over the Nazi headquarters. So from there on, I met this soldier by the name of Jack Schultz, who was in Louisiana. But backtracking, in the meantime, my mother was taken to Auschwitz. So Jack, aware that I was an orphan, or he thought I was an orphan there, immediately tried to get the Red Cross with paperwork and so forth to try to adopt me and take me to New Orleans. Also, the things that happened even before that was that a lot of these people that tried to save us were unknown to us. All I knew was that we just kept moving, and they just kept moving me constantly. And I was not aware of a mother or a father, any of that. But one time I did see my mother before they moved me, but it was only for a couple of hours. And that was the last that I had seen of her. When Jack started the paperwork with the Red Cross, he immediately was able to contact his parents in the United States and willing to see if they would adopt me. And they said, yes, they'd be more than happy. But what happens now in 1947, while I'm standing in the orphanage there, my mother appears. She was in Auschwitz that whole time, but she had typhus, and when she recovered, she came to get me. Well, I was very upset about that because she was a stranger and Jack was the one who would bring me food and take me for rides. And he was just so wonderful. It was the first time that anyone really paid any kind of attention to me. Now, I've also, going back again, in the convent, I was baptized and I had a confirmation, and the veil is in the museum right now. And I was able to keep all that. My mother, after she got me from the orphanage, took me back. We went back to Belgium, and the Jewish Relief Fund were able to find us an apartment. My grandmother was the only person that I really knew, and she, by Madame Dergelas, was taken to an old age home, and it was a Catholic old age homes, and she said that this woman was related to her. We went back afterwards to Belgium, to Brussels, my mother and I, and we stayed in this one room place, and my grandmother was able to leave the old age home, and she stayed with us in the one room. My grandmother passed away there, and for 2 days, my mother couldn't find a burial place for her. Anyways, she finally did, and we, through the Red Cross again, were able to find that my father had gone to Montreal because the United States refused to let him in. And then he found that we were alive, and he contacted a distant cousin of his in Connecticut who was willing to give him a job and to vouch for him if he came to the States and take care of him. So my father finally came to the States, and we were able to get a visa in 1950. And my mother and I came to the States, and we were reunited with my father. For me as a young child, this whole thing was very, very difficult because it kept moving me, and of course, a strange land, strange people, and I couldn't speak a word of English, had never been to school at all, and they put me into the 7th grade, and my father decided, seeing that I was 13 years old, and that I had to go to the yeshiva. Of course, the yeshiva didn't mean anything to me because I was a good convert and I was a good Catholic. So I didn't know what he wanted, and I think I sort of resented him. Anyways, the yeshiva didn't last very long because I wouldn't cooperate at all. And another language, another strange place with strange people. So I left he finally took me out of the convent and decided, out of the yeshiva, and he decided that I had to go then to Hebrew school. So what I did is I went to Hebrew school 3 days a week, and he decided I needed to be bar mitzvah, which I was, and I also felt very guilty doing this. So every Friday I had a good Catholic friend that I met in school. We would go to confession together. So I was really leading 2 religions at one time. Anyways, I did graduate high school, and I graduated college, and then I decided that I was going to teach, but that didn't last very long. I found that I could not understand why children here who had so much and had parents were so difficult to manage. So I decided this was just not an occupation for me. And I went into retailing in the United States, and I was very happy doing that. I got married, have 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters, and I am so happy to be here in Naples, and God bless America, and I've never been happier than being in this country with food and everything.
Thank you so much, Thank you so much. So we have some questions that have come through in chat. I think this one is for Renee Beddouk. So Renee Beddouk, did you have to hide being Jewish? And how did you find out that you were Jewish later?
Well, I found out my grandmother lived with us. I'm not sure that she kept a kosher home. Oops. I knew that I was Jewish, but I don't remember. I don't think my parents were particularly religious. So all I knew was the word Jewish. And then since I was told not to mention it, at one time, I thought maybe the farmers didn't know that I was Jewish, but that they knew that I was Jewish, and to them it was no problem. I mean, really, for them, having already 6 children, and to take a 7th like me was actually I don't know how my aunt and uncle found them, but I was happy because I felt loved. My name was not changed because it's what my maiden name is a Slavic name, could be anything. So some people have asked me if there were other children, Jewish children in the class. There might have been, but that was not a subject. Nobody talked about religion at the farm. You know, Sunday we went to mass, you know, we walked, and that was it. So and since I had been told not to talk about it, I didn't say anything either. So I was unable to find out whether they were. Somebody told me that there had been others also, but I don't know.
Yes, Maud.
It was the same thing. I was brought up, the families and the area where we were staying were very religious evangelists, and I went to church every Sunday. When we came back with my parents on Sunday, we said, oh, we have to go to church. And my parents, and that's, why are you not going to church? And even though I knew I couldn't tell anyone I was Jewish because I would be killed, but I didn't really know what it meant at the time. So then my parents explained to me that I was Jewish and what that meant. So it was the same kind of thing.
And you have, I think, said in your film that you really are immersed in both religions. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's a question. Was the family that held you, that hid you, I think this is for Renee Beddouk, or maybe both Renee and Maud, hid by families, were the neighbors concerned that neighbors would turn you in?
Well, it's Estanda is a small village, and the farms are very separated. As I said, the small nucleus of the town, but we were about 2.5 kilometers from the town. I don't know. I know that Marceline had a very good friend, Angèle, because my mother made a mistake about the names. And that after their chores were done and the kids were coming back from school, the women would meet and chat. But I don't know if they said anything. I didn't know. I was too young to understand. All I knew is that I was Jewish. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't realize, because I don't think we really were practicing. And I just knew that I should not talk about it. So it didn't talk about it. And my aunt and uncle, who raised me in New York, were agnostic, so I was not practicing.
It was very interesting because many years I'm in the Netherlands every year, but the one time I went with my sister, and it seems the whole village was so excited because Maud and Rita were back. So everyone seemed to know all this time while we were on the farm in this village of Olderbroek, everybody knew who we really were and never said anything.
There's a question, what happened to the couple who took you in on the farm?
I had conflicting feelings, because I was thankful that they saved me. But in another way, it was where I found out that my parents had been taken by the Nazis. So I didn't continue. My aunt continued relations with some of the children for a certain time. And I didn't reconnect with them, with the children, until the summer of 2011. That's why I found out through one of the other students who were there, because, then I kept the connection open. And we had a big to-do with a big family picture when we had the ceremony for Yad Vashem.
People on the farm, we had to call the man an uncle, and because we were supposed to be their nieces, and he died in January of 1944, but she continued to hide us until, as I said, the end of 1944. But we always kept in contact with her. My sister and I spent all our summer vacations with her, and even now they have all passed, but I am very close to all the nieces. They not have children, but all the nieces and nephews and children that every year we all get together. And it's still a very close relationship because my sister and I owe our lives to all of them.
And Renee Fritz, do you stay in touch with any of the nuns or other people?
They've all passed away. I had a video, Triumph of the Spirit, that was made, which was on PBS, and I went with a group of reporters overseas where they researched everything, and we went back to the convent, we went back everywhere, and they've all passed away, but that's how I was able to get the picture of the nuns, and also, retrieve my veil. Madame Degelas had retrieved it, but they've all passed away. And the farmers, we tried to get a hold of them. We went on TV and everything, but they must have moved out of the area. And so then we went back to the orphanage, which right now became a private residence, but none of the people that hid me were available anymore. We did see Jack Schultz in 1964, and when we went to New Orleans, and we went through the phone book and looking and started calling every Jack Schultz, and finally we found a person who knew who Suzanne Ledon was, because he never knew what my real name was, so we figured he would probably forget it. So anyways, we were reunited, and the newspapers came and everything, and it was It was really good. And then we stayed in contact for a couple of years and then he passed away. So, no one is alive anymore. But Madame Dejelas was honored at Yad Vashem. I know that.
In the past, I've gone to her classes at school, but now that I have the PowerPoint, it's easy, the Zoom, and now I'm not going to the class anyway, but I've done it for both the groups at the museum and students at the museum. And well, since I've known Sarah for so long, she can always call me.
I also speak at schools, and of course now it's been Zooms, but and I'm sure all of us prefer to be in person. It's more difficult with a Zoom. However, I ask every teacher, and I did one this morning again, I asked the teacher to invite the parents, because most of our students in New Jersey are virtual, to also invite the parents, because they are home, because their children are home, to also invite the parents to listen to our stories. Because now we know that the conversation at the dinner table is very different. Both parent and child have heard our stories. And I think that's so important. That's the one thing that I really think is really a plus with doing Zooms.
Do you find that when you speak to the children about the amazing hardships that you all had to face, that they feel perhaps a bit more gratitude for what they do have?
I think it also depends on what age group. I started 5th grade, and I could see, especially with the older kids, especially in some of the inner cities, yes, they can really relate. But that's why I think it's so important to have the parents too, because the discussion is very different because of what the parent and the child contribute.
In the past, I have done with students of alternate learning groups, and I have found them absolutely attentive, thankful. For me, I don't remember how many years ago it was, some weird school that was their first graduating school, and their auditorium was a former movie theater. And they came all sizes, all shapes, all colors to thank me for coming. And that had happened at a couple of alternate, and I found them really very, very attentive and moved because they didn't know that somebody else could have that kind of story. And I think I'm lucky because I fell with such a loving family, even though they look so stern. But I found them very, very, very appreciative.
I think especially in today's world, it's very important for everyone to listen to our stories because what is happening in the United States is very new to many Americans, but some of us have lived through some of these situations. So I think that's so important for us to share our stories.
And Maud, you have taken tours of students over to Europe, right?
Now, every year for the last 20 years, I take teachers, New Jersey teachers.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's been a wonderful experience. The teachers union is very supportive of it and helps financially also to support this. And it is just amazing to see what these teachers are doing in their classrooms after they have been to the Holocaust sites. And they've heard survivors, they've seen the films, but now to actually be there changes them forever. And their students it's amazing how their students are benefiting of what projects and the things that they do from what they have seen and felt.
Thank you all for educating the students and for partnering with the museum. We appreciate all you do to help spread these important messages of being upstanders and just to realize the risks that these families took by hiding children like you at great risk to themselves. And they did it because it was the right thing to do.